Russia gave the world Tolstoy, Dostoevsky, Chekhov, among the greatest writers in human history. Their books are read in every literature class on earth. But today, the United Nations Special Rapporteur describes Russia as a state-sponsored system of fear and punishment, where dissent is erased. Russia produced Tchaikovsky, Rachmaninoff, Stravinsky, three of classical music's most influential composers. The Bolshoi and Mariinsky theaters remain among the world's premier stages. But Russia is now the third largest jailer of journalists in the world. Yuri Dud, one of the country's most popular interviewers, fled to Barcelona in 2022 and was sentenced in absentia in 2025. Russia was first in space, the first satellite, the first human in orbit, Yuri Gagarin. It still produces world-class scientists, mathematicians, and chess players. But Russia's army is fed by forced mobilization. Refusing carries up to 15 years in prison under Article 328 of the Russian Criminal Code. Three Russian voices became symbols of what happens when you speak. Alexei Navalny, the most prominent opposition figure of his generation, returned to Moscow in January 2021 after surviving a state poisoning and was immediately imprisoned. He died in a polar penal colony on the 16th of February 2024. Oleg Tinkov, billionaire founder of Tinkov Bank, renounced his Russian citizenship after publicly opposing the war and called the regime a disgrace. Yuri Dud, Russia's most popular YouTube interviewer, left for Barcelona in February 2022, was declared a foreign agent and sentenced to 1 year and 10 months in prison in absentia in 2025. You are watching the Human Rights Expert Witness channel. We are country expert witnesses based in London. We write expert reports for immigration tribunals in the United Kingdom, the United States, Canada, and the European Union. For this episode, we have reviewed dozens of Russian asylum cases, all anonymized. If you are looking for a country expert witness, our verified list of qualified experts is linked in the description below. Modern Russia begins in December 1991, when the Soviet Union collapsed and the Russian Federation was born. For most of the 1990s, Russia was a chaotic but real democracy, a free press, multiple parties, independent television. On the 31st of December 1999, Boris Yeltsin handed power to a former Soviet KGB officer named Vladimir Putin. He has held power ever since, over 26 years, longer than Brezhnev, longer than any leader since Stalin. Through the 2000s, the space for opposition closed slowly. Independent television was taken over. Opposition leaders died, some by murder, some by mysterious illness. In 2011 and 2012, mass protests on Bolotnaya Square against electoral fraud were met with mass arrests. In 2014, Russia annexed Crimea and began the war in eastern Ukraine. International sanctions began. Russian human rights organizations like Memorial, the country's most respected, were declared foreign agents. In August 2020, Alexei Navalny was poisoned with Novichok by Russian security services. He survived in a German hospital. In January 2021, he returned to Russia and was arrested at the airport. In December 2021, Memorial was banned by the Supreme Court. On the 24th of February 2022, Russia launched the full-scale invasion of Ukraine. Within days, anti-war protests were criminalized. Two new criminal articles were added. Article 207.3 for spreading false information about the army, and Article 280.3 for discreditation of the armed forces. Both carry up to 15 years in prison. On the 21st of September 2022, partial mobilization was announced. Within weeks, over 700,000 Russian men had left the country to Kazakhstan, Georgia, Armenia, Serbia, Turkey, the European Union. On the 16th of February 2024, Alexei Navalny died in a polar penal colony after spending 396 days in solitary confinement.
Russian authorities have sharpened the laws on so-called foreign agents and undesirable organizations, targeting human rights defenders, civil society, and independent media.
In November 2023, the Russian Supreme Court banned the international LGBT movement as extremist. In 2024, the United Nations Human Rights Council renewed the mandate of its special rapporteur on Russia, Mariana Katsarova. The vote was 20-19, with 8 abstentions. Russia denounced the mandate as illegitimate. The work continued, and this is where we are today. Now we will show you who is in danger. If you are in Russia and you belong to any of these groups, you may be at risk. 1. Mobilization refusers and conscientious objectors, Article 328, up to 15 years in prison. 2. Anti-war activists and protesters, even those who held a single blank sign. 3. Political opposition, Navalny team members, members of banned extremist organizations. 4. Journalists, bloggers, media workers, over 1,040 individuals on the Foreign Agents Registry. 5. Lawyers defending dissidents, including 3 of Navalny's lawyers sentenced for extremism. 6. Gay, lesbian, and transgender Russians. Since November 2023, the international LGBT movement is officially extremist. 7. Religious minorities. Jehovah's Witnesses banned as extremist. Crimean Tatars. Some Muslim communities. 8. Chechens and other North Caucasus nationals, facing additional pressure and mobilization quotas. 9. Bloggers and social media users prosecuted under fakes about the army. 10. Family members of exiled critics, pressured, prosecuted in place of the exile. 11. Civil society activists. Memorial, OVD Info, the Sakharov Center, all liquidated or designated undesirable. 12. Ukrainians in occupied territories and Russians of Ukrainian heritage, forced into Russian citizenship or military service. If you recognize yourself in this list, keep watching. If you are in a similar situation, you can find a list of country expert reports for Russia on our website. You can use them as evidence in your asylum claim. You can also find a verified list of country expert witnesses on Russia. Link in the description. Now, let us look at the 5 main reasons people flee Russia today. On the 21st of September 2022, Vladimir Putin announced partial mobilization. He claimed 300,000 reservists would be called up. In reality, the number was higher, the criteria broader, and the methods often brutal. What followed was one of the largest peacetime exoduses in modern European history. Within 2 weeks, over 700,000 Russian men had crossed the borders into Kazakhstan, Georgia, Armenia, Mongolia, Serbia, Turkey, Finland. Border queues at Verkhney Lars between Russia and Georgia stretched for 30 kilometers. Russia's army still relies on mobilization today. There has been no second mass announcement. The government uses quiet mobilization, sending summonses through workplaces, conscription offices, and police checkpoints. Ethnic minorities, Buryats, Tuvans, Dagestanis, Chechens are mobilized at rates far above the Russian national average. Cities like Moscow and St. Petersburg are barely touched. Poor regions take the casualties. Refusing carries up to 15 years in prison under Article 328 of the Russian Criminal Code. There is no civilian alternative service available in practice for mobilization, and conscientious objection on religious grounds is treated as extremism. Russia has been moving from imperfect democracy to authoritarian state for over 2 decades. What changed in 2022 was the speed. What was a slow squeeze became a hammer. The most prominent face of Russian opposition was Alexei Navalny, lawyer, anti-corruption investigator, founder of the Anti-Corruption Foundation, survived a Novichok poisoning by Russian security services in August 2020, returned to Russia in January 2021, and was immediately arrested at the airport. He spent over 3 years in increasingly harsh conditions, 396 days in solitary confinement before his death. On the 16th of February 2024, he died in a polar penal colony in Yamalo-Nenets. Russian authorities called it sudden cardiac arrest. His family, his colleagues, and independent European laboratories disagree. His structures, the Anti-Corruption Foundation and his headquarters network, were banned as extremist organizations in June 2021. Membership alone carries a criminal sentence. His team, Leonid Volkov, Ivan Zhdanov, Maria Pevchik, Kira Yarmish, works from exile in Vilnius, Berlin, Amsterdam. Ilya Yashin, longtime opposition politician, ally of Boris Nemtsov, refused to leave Russia after the war began, sentenced to 8.5 years in 2022 for spreading false information about the army, referencing the Bucha massacre, released in the largest prisoner swap since the Cold War in August 2024. Continues opposition work from Berlin. Vladimir Kara-Murza, opposition activist journalist twice poisoned in 2015 and 2017, sentenced to 25 years in 2023 for treason and spreading false information, also released in the August 2024 prisoner swap.
His real crime was dissenting against the war and supporting Ukraine.
Russia is now the third largest jailer of journalists in the world. Only China and Israel hold more. The methods are well developed. The Foreign Agents Law was first passed in 2012. Originally targeting non-governmental organizations receiving foreign funding, it has been expanded again and again. By 2025, over 1,040 individuals and organizations were on the list. Once designated, you must label every public statement, including a personal social media post, with a 15-word warning that you are a foreign agent. You face criminal charges for failure to comply. The Undesirable Organizations Law went further. 46 new organizations were declared undesirable in 2025 alone, bringing the total to 245. Once an organization is undesirable, members face criminal charges for any cooperation.
That the Russian Federation is now the third largest jailer of journalists in the world, with 50 media professionals currently behind bars, including in absentia trials against journalists and media workers in exile. 1,040 individuals and organizations are labeled as foreign agents. Once so designated, organizations and individuals are banned from providing education, stripped of income, blocked from media. 46 new organizations had been designated and banned as undesirable, bringing the total to 245.
Yuri Dud, Russia's most popular YouTube interviewer, documentary series viewed by tens of millions, left Russia in February 2022 with the start of the full-scale war, declared a foreign agent in April 2022. In 2025, sentenced in absentia to 1 year and 10 months in prison for evasion of foreign agent duties. Lives and works in Barcelona. Meduza, Novaya Gazeta, Radio Liberty Russian Service, BBC Russian, Deutsche Welle Russian. All independent Russian language media now operate from outside Russia, most based in Riga, Berlin, Amsterdam, Vilnius. Their journalists face in absentia prosecutions, foreign agent labels, and asset freezes inside Russia. 2 new criminal articles were added on the 4th of March 2022, 8 days after the start of the full-scale invasion. Article 207.3, public dissemination of knowingly false information about the use of the Russian armed forces, and Article 280.3, discreditation of the armed forces. Both articles criminalize speech. Article 207.3 carries up to 15 years. Article 280.3 starts as an administrative offense and becomes criminal on the second instance, up to 7 years. By 2025, hundreds of people had been sentenced under these articles. Their crime was a Facebook post, a blank sign, a council meeting statement, a supermarket price tag. Alexei Gorinov, Moscow municipal deputy. On the 15th of March 2022, at a routine council meeting on a children's drawing competition, he used the word war and said nearly 100 children had been killed in Ukraine. He was the first person in Russia sentenced to a penal colony under Article 207.3, 7 years, later reduced to 6 years and 11 months. In November 2024, an additional 3 years were added on a separate justifying terrorism charge. He is held in Penal Colony 10 in Rubtsovsk, Altai Krai. Alexander Skochilenko, St. Petersburg artist, replaced supermarket price tags with small anti-war messages, sentenced to 7 years in November 2023. Released in the August 2024 prisoner swap, and tens of thousands more. Detained for holding blank pieces of paper, for wearing yellow and blue clothing, for reciting Russian classical poetry against war, for laying flowers at the Ukrainian embassy. Over 20,000 administrative arrests for discreditation since February 2022.
His real crime was dissenting against the war and supporting Ukraine. The books of the only living Nobel Prize laureate for literature who writes in Russian language.
Russia's persecution does not stop at political dissent. Other groups face direct legal designation. On the 30th of November 2023, the Russian Supreme Court ruled in a closed hearing that The international LGBT movement is an extremist organization. No one was on trial. There was no defendant. The court was naming a category of people. Today, any rainbow flag, any pride emoji, any social media post supportive of gay or transgender rights can be prosecuted under Article 282.1, organizing extremist activity, up to 10 years. In 2017, the Russian Supreme Court banned the Jehovah's Witnesses faith as an extremist organization. By 2025, hundreds of Jehovah's Witnesses had been criminally prosecuted, with sentences from suspended terms up to 7 and 8 years for participation in an extremist organization. Crimean Tatars, the indigenous Muslim people of Crimea, occupied since 2014, have faced systematic targeting. Their representative body, the Mejlis, was banned as extremist in 2016. Dozens of Crimean Tatar activists have been imprisoned under terrorism charges for membership in Hizb ut-Tahrir, a movement legal in most European countries. And ethnic minorities of Russia, Buryats, Tuvans, Sakha, Dagestanis, face disproportionate mobilization quotas, cultural language restrictions, and have been most vocal in anti-war movements abroad. After February 2022, the Russian diaspora exploded. Estimates of deported Russians range from 800,000 to 1.5 million in just the first 2 years. The destinations and recognition rates are very different. Germany, the largest European destination for Russian political asylum. Recognition rates 50 to 70% for documented political opposition, journalists, gay and transgender Russians. Mobilization refuses. Special humanitarian visa pathway for at-risk Russians. United States, active asylum docket for Russian opposition, journalists, foreign agents. Recognition rates 40 to 60%. Warning, 2024 and 2025 changes have included some Russian asylum seekers being deported. United Kingdom, successful claims for political opposition, journalists, gay and transgender applicants. Mobilization refuses. Recognition rates 40 to 60% with a strong expert report. Spain. Barcelona has become one of the centers of Russian opposition exile. Yuri Dud lives there. Multiple journalists. The Tinkov circle. Recognition rates 30 to 50%. Israel. The law of return pathway for Russians of Jewish heritage. Used by tens of thousands of Russians since 2022. A faster route than asylum, but with citizenship test requirements. Argentina, Canada, France, Netherlands. Argentina has become a major destination because of visa-free entry, plus jus soli citizenship for children. Canada, France, Netherlands all receive Russian asylum applications with mixed results. And one important warning, Belarus, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, these are not safe for Russian dissidents. Direct extradition risk documented. Turkey and Serbia have allowed Russian dissidents to be detained or pushed back in documented cases. What these numbers tell you is simple.
50 Russian asylum seekers from United States were deported back to Moscow. They were awaited by the security services, many of them tortured.
Russia is recognized across the democratic world as a country where systematic persecution makes asylum claims credible. The evidence required is rigorous. The recognition is regular. Asylum is granted when the state cannot protect you from a well-founded fear of persecution on one of 5 refugee convention grounds. For Russia, multiple grounds are routinely engaged. Political opinion, real or imputed, applies to political opposition, the Navalny team, journalists, foreign agents, anti-war protesters, mobilization refusers, religion, Jehovah's Witnesses, banned as extremist, Scientologists, certain Muslim communities such as Crimean Tatars on a Hizb ut-Tahrir profile. Race or ethnicity, Crimean Tatars, indigenous Buryats, Tuvans, Sakha, subject to mobilization quotas, Chechens, particular social group, gay, lesbian, and transgender Russians, a recognized particular social group, confirmed by the November 2023 International LGBT movement, extremist designation. Journalists, family members of exiled critics, men of mobilization age. The biggest question for a Russian asylum case is usually not the persecution. It is the question of internal relocation. Courts often ask, Russia is a vast country, can you not just move to a different city? The honest expert witness answer is, Russia is one of the most surveilled societies on earth. The Federal Security Service operates nationally. Registration of residence is mandatory and tracked. the foreign agents list, the extremist organizations list, the criminal databases, all are federal. The expert witness cannot accept or reject the applicant's testimony. That is the court's role. The expert assesses the applicant's account against the country situation and provides a detailed conclusion on the risk of return and the risk of internal relocation. In most cases, if the claimed information is accepted by the court, internal relocation and return to Russia are unsafe for these types of persecution. And if the court accepts the applicant's evidence, asylum can be granted in most cases. This is why a personal assessment of each individual case is critically important. Russia is the homeland of Tolstoy, Dostoevsky, and Chekhov, the country that gave the world Tchaikovsky, Mendeleev, and Gagarin. The Russian people are among the most highly educated in Europe. None of that is in question. What is in question is the system that rules them. Freedom House rates Russia as not free, among the lowest scores globally. The United Nations Special Rapporteur describes the country as a state-sponsored system of fear and punishment, where dissent is erased. Russia is now the third largest jailer of journalists in the world. 1,040 individuals on the foreign agents list. 245 organizations declared undesirable. 3 of Alexei Navalny's own lawyers sentenced for extremism, for being his lawyers. Alexei Navalny is buried in Moscow. Ilya Yashin and Vladimir Kara-Murza continue their work from Berlin. Yuri Dud broadcasts from Barcelona. Oleg Tinkov speaks from outside Russia. The team of the Anti-Corruption Foundation operates from Vilnius and Amsterdam. Memorial publishes from Berlin. The pattern is the same: silence and prison at home, or freedom and exile abroad. If you are a Russian asylum seeker, you need a country expert report that proves your case against the country information. If you are a solicitor, you need an expert who knows the Federal Security Service from the Investigative Committee, Article 207.3, from Article 280.3, the Foreign Agents Registry from the Extremist Organizations List, and the September 2022 Mobilization Wave from the Quiet Mobilization, continuing today. Subscribe to the channel for the next country in our Why People Flee series. Comment below, which country should we cover next? Share this video with anyone who needs it. This is the state of fear. We will see you in the next one.